I joked about marrying my Apache neighbor. She shocked me. I've been waiting for this day, rancher. He had grown up on his family's ranch, surrounded by wide open fields, dusty trails, and the steady rhythm of farm animals going about their daily work. The sun rose and set over the hills almost like clockwork, and the days often began with the sound of roosters crowing, cattle lowing in the pastures, and the occasional distant bark of a dog. He had always thought that this simple, peaceful life suited him perfectly. He liked the smell of hay in the morning, the sight of horses grazing lazily in the sunlight, and the feeling of soil between his fingers when he worked the land. For Jake, there was something comforting in the routine, a sense of connection to his family, to the land, and to the generations who had come before him. Across the fence from his property lived Leela, a young Apache woman who had grown up nearby. She had lived in the same house for as long as Jake could remember, and she and her family were known in the community for their warmth and kindness. Leela herself was strong and spirited, with a sharp sense of humor and a quiet confidence that drew people to her. She often helped her parents with chores, but she also had a curiosity about the world that made her more adventurous than most people in their small town. Despite living so close, Jake had never thought much about Leela in a romantic sense. She was a friend, a neighbor, someone he could count on to lend a hand when he needed it, and for years that was enough. One sunny afternoon, Jake was fixing a broken fence post near the edge of his property when he noticed Leela walking along the dirt path that separated their homes. She waved cheerfully, carrying a basket filled with fresh vegetables from her garden. "Hey, Jake," she called out, her voice carrying across the warm, quiet air. "Looks like you're working hard again." Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead and grinned. "You know me," he replied. "I can't seem to sit still for long. The land needs taking care of." He chuckled, knowing she would understand. They had shared many small conversations like this over the years, simple greetings, jokes about chores, comments about the weather, but nothing deeper. Leela walked over, placing her basket down on the ground. "Need some help?" she asked. "I'm pretty good with hammer and nails, you know." Jake laughed. "I might take you up on that one day. Don't want you straining your muscles for me yet, though." He looked at her with a teasing grin and then said something that had been floating in his mind as a joke, almost without thinking. "You know, maybe I should just marry you. That way you'd be around to help me every day, and I wouldn't have to worry about fixing fences alone." He expected her to laugh, maybe roll her eyes and continue on her way like any normal neighbor would. But this time, something felt different. Leela did laugh, soft and polite at first, but then she looked at him with a small, almost secretive smile, her eyes sparkling in a way that made Jake feel a little off balance. "Marry me, huh?" she said, her voice calm but carrying a hint of amusement. "You always have the funniest ideas, Jake." Jake chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his head. "I'm serious, kind of. I mean, it's just a joke, of course." He waved his hand, hoping to dismiss it as playful banter. "Don't take me too seriously." But Leela didn't immediately respond. She just smiled and said, "Well, maybe one day it won't be a joke." She turned and walked away, leaving Jake standing there, hammer in hand, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and unease. He shook his head. "She's joking, right?" he muttered to himself, still uncertain. Over the next few days, Jake noticed subtle changes in how Leela interacted with him. She would stop by more often, offering small gifts from her garden, fresh tomatoes, sweet corn, and sometimes even a freshly baked loaf of bread. She always had a smile, a kind word, or a playful comment that made his day brighter. At first, Jake assumed it was just her usual friendliness, the same warmth she had shown to the entire community for as long as he had known her. But gradually, he began to notice little details he had never paid attention to before. The way she laughed at his jokes a fraction longer than necessary, the way her eyes seemed to follow him when he worked, the small pauses in her conversation when she was around him. Jake found himself thinking about Leela more than usual. He would catch himself glancing toward her house when he had nothing to do, wondering what she was up to. He would remember small conversations, moments of shared laughter, and the quiet comfort of her presence. It was confusing, because he had never really considered Leela in that way before. She had always been part of the scenery of his life, someone familiar and constant, and now, suddenly, he noticed her in a completely different light. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Jake was sitting on the porch steps, sipping water after a long day of work. Leela appeared at the fence again, holding a basket of freshly picked flowers this time. "These are for you," she said, extending the basket, "just because." Jake felt a warmth spread through him. "Thanks, Leela," he said, genuinely touched. "They're beautiful." She smiled and leaned casually on the fence, looking at him with an intensity he hadn't noticed before. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes I wonder if people realize how small actions can mean so much." Jake blinked, unsure how to respond. I think I get what you mean." She laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that made everything feel lighter, and then she said something that made Jake's heart skip a beat. "Maybe your little joke about marriage wasn't just a joke after all." Jake laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "I really didn't mean anything by it." But Leela just smiled, tilted her head slightly, and walked back toward her house without another word. Jake sat there for a long time, staring at the empty path, thinking about what she had said. He couldn't quite figure out if she was serious, teasing, or perhaps a little of both. For the first time in a long time, he felt uncertain about something in his life, and that uncertainty was both unsettling and strangely exciting. That night Jake lay in bed, thinking about Leela. He replayed their conversation over and over in his mind, trying to decipher her smile, her words, and the way she looked at him. He realized that he had underestimated the depth of their friendship, the quiet strength of her character, and the possibility that his joke had stirred something unexpected in her heart. He drifted off to sleep with a mix of confusion and curiosity, wondering what the next day might bring. The following morning, as Jake worked the ranch, he caught sight of Leela in the distance, tending to her garden. She looked up and waved, her smile brighter than ever. Jake waved back, feeling a flutter of something new in his chest. He realized that life, even in a quiet town like theirs, had a way of surprising you when you least expected it. A simple joke, a fleeting comment, could ripple through someone's heart and change everything, even without intending to. From that moment on, Jake started to notice little signs of connection everywhere, small gestures, lingering glances, shared laughter. It was as if a door had opened that he hadn't even realized was there. And though he didn't yet fully understand what it meant, he felt a growing sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement about what might unfold between him and the neighbor he had always known, and perhaps underestimated, named Leela. Over the next few days, Jake began to notice subtle changes in Leela's behavior, though he tried to convince himself he was imagining things. She still came over with baskets of vegetables or freshly baked bread, but there was something different in the way she approached him now. She lingered longer when she helped him with chores, and her laughter seemed warmer, more personal, almost as if it carried a message meant only for him. One morning, as Jake repaired a broken gate on the edge of the pasture, Leela appeared carrying 2 large buckets of water. "Here," she said, setting them down beside him. "I thought you might need a hand before the sun gets too high." Jake paused and looked at her, momentarily caught off guard. "You didn't have to do that," he said, though a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "I know," Leela replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "but I wanted to." Her words hung in the air, simple yet full of meaning. Jake felt a warmth spreading through him that he wasn't used to feeling, a gentle pull he couldn't ignore. He tried to focus on the task at hand, but his mind kept drifting to her, to the way her eyes sparkled in the morning sunlight, and to the soft way she moved as she carried the water. As they worked side by side, Jake found himself talking more openly than usual. "You've always been good at this," he said, nodding toward the buckets. "You make it look easy." Leela laughed, a soft, musical sound that made Jake grin. "I've had a lot of practice, and besides, it's not so hard when you enjoy what you do." Jake nodded, feeling a strange connection to her words. There was a depth in her simplicity, a quiet confidence that made him respect her even more. And yet, beneath the respect, there was something else he couldn't quite define, a growing curiosity, a sense that their friendship was on the verge of changing in ways he hadn't expected. Over the next week, Jake noticed that Leela seemed to find excuses to be around him more often. She would stop by while he was feeding the horses, offering to help him groom them or refill the water troughs. She would bring freshly baked bread or pies and leave them on the porch, always with a small note that made Jake chuckle or think deeply. One note said, "A little sweetness for someone who makes life brighter." Another simply read, "Thank you for being you." At first, Jake thought she was just being kind, just her natural self. But gradually, he began to feel that there was something more behind her gestures. He noticed the way she would glance at him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way her hands sometimes brushed against his when passing him a tool, the way she smiled at him in a way that made his chest feel lighter. One evening, after a long day of work in the fields, Jake sat on the porch, wiping the sweat from his brow. He watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, and he felt a sense of calm wash over him. Just then, Leela appeared at the fence with a small basket of fresh herbs. "I thought you might like some," she said, holding out the basket. "I just picked them from the garden." Jake took the basket, feeling a small thrill at the simple exchange. "Thanks, Leela. This is thoughtful of you." She leaned on the fence, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "Jake," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, curious. "Do you ever think about what it would be like if things were different?" she asked, her voice gentle. Jake blinked, unsure how to answer. "Different how?" Leela smiled faintly. "Different, like if we weren't just neighbors or friends, like if maybe we could be more." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. He had never considered this possibility seriously, though a small part of him had begun to wonder over the past few days. He looked at her, searching for signs that she was joking or testing him, but her expression was calm, sincere, and full of a quiet hope. I don't know," he said finally, trying to choose his words carefully. "I've never thought about it like that. I mean, you're my friend and I respect you a lot. I didn't expect this." Leela nodded, not showing any disappointment. "I know," she said softly. "I didn't expect it either. I just wanted to tell you how I feel. Even if nothing comes of it, I needed you to know." Jake felt a mix of emotions: surprise, curiosity, a sudden awareness of how much he valued her presence. He realized that Leela had been paying attention to him in ways he hadn't noticed before, that she had been quietly supporting him, and that her feelings were genuine. He didn't yet know how to respond, but he knew one thing: he couldn't ignore her words. Over the next few days, their interactions began to shift. They continued to work together on the ranch, but now there was a subtle tension, a quiet understanding that something new was forming between them. Jake found himself looking forward to her visits, noticing the little details about her, the way she tied her hair, the sound of her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her day. One afternoon, as they were repairing a section of fence near the edge of the property, Leela paused and handed Jake a hammer. "Here," she said, smiling. "I think you might need this more than me." Jake took the hammer, their fingers brushing lightly. He felt a warmth in that simple touch, a connection that went beyond friendship. "Thanks," he said softly, almost to himself. They worked in silence for a few moments, the only sounds being the wind through the trees and the occasional call of a bird. Jake felt a growing sense of closeness, a realization that his feelings for Leela were changing. She wasn't just a friend or a helpful neighbor anymore. She was someone who mattered deeply, someone whose presence brightened his days in ways he hadn't understood until now. As the days passed, Jake began to notice little acts of kindness from Leela that seemed almost personal. She would leave him small gifts, like a jar of honey or a fresh loaf of bread, with notes that made him smile or think. She would offer to help with chores, always finding ways to make his work easier, and she would laugh at his jokes in a way that made him feel appreciated and seen. One evening, Jake found himself walking toward Leela's house with a basket of apples he had picked from the orchard. He felt a flutter of nervousness in his chest, a new sensation he hadn't experienced before. He knocked on her door, and when she opened it, she smiled warmly. "Hey, Jake," she said. "What brings you here?" "I thought you might like some fresh apples," he said, holding out the basket. "From my orchard." Leela accepted them with a smile. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful of you." They sat on the porch together, eating apples and talking about their days. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter, shared stories, and quiet moments of understanding. Jake realized that he was beginning to see Leela in a completely new light, appreciating her kindness, her strength, and the gentle way she had always been there for him. As the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Jake felt a sense of calm and happiness that he hadn't experienced before. He knew that something was changing between him and Leela, something important and meaningful. And though he wasn't sure exactly what the future held, he felt a quiet excitement, a sense that their friendship was evolving into something deeper, something that could change their lives forever. The day of the town gathering arrived, and the small community buzzed with excitement. It was one of those occasions everyone looked forward to, a time when neighbors came together to celebrate the changing seasons, share food, and enjoy each other's company. Jake had been busy with ranch chores all morning, but he had made an effort to clean up and prepare for the gathering. As he looked over his shoulder at the open fields, he felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Today felt different, somehow. He couldn't explain why, but there was a sense of expectation in the air that made his chest tighten. Leela was already at the gathering when Jake arrived, her presence as calm and confident as always. She greeted him with a warm smile that made him feel both comforted and uneasy at the same time. He waved awkwardly, feeling the weight of the previous conversations between them, the small gestures, and the unspoken words that had been building over the past week. He wasn't sure how she would act in front of the others, whether she would treat him as a friend or someone more. The community hall was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of freshly baked bread and pies. Children ran about playing simple games, while adults chatted in small groups, sharing stories and news. Jake found himself wandering through the hall, greeting neighbors and friends, but he couldn't stop glancing at Leela. She moved through the crowd with a grace that made it hard for him to look away, her eyes occasionally meeting his in brief flashes that sent shivers down his spine. As the evening wore on, the music softened, and the crowd began to settle. People gathered around for announcements, prizes, and a few speeches. Jake found himself standing near the edge of the hall, watching Leela talk to her friends. Then, unexpectedly, she turned and walked toward him. The chatter of the hall seemed to fade into the background as she approached, and Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest. "Jake," she said softly, her voice almost drowned by the noise around them, "can we talk for a moment?" He nodded, following her outside into the cool evening air. The sky was painted with stars, and the moon cast a gentle glow over the fields surrounding the town. It was quiet here, far enough from the gathering that only the distant laughter and music reached them. Leela took a deep breath and looked at him, her expression serious but filled with warmth. "I've been meaning to tell you something for a long time," she said. "Ever since that day you joked about marrying me." Jake's stomach tightened. He remembered the moment clearly, the joke, the way she had smiled and the strange feeling he had gotten afterward. He had never expected this conversation to happen, not like this. "Leela, he started, but she raised a hand gently, stopping him. "Please," she said. "Just listen." She took a step closer, and Jake noticed the small trembling in her hands. "I've been waiting for this moment for years," she continued. "I didn't think I would ever have the courage to tell you how I feel. I've admired you from afar, respected you, and cared for you deeply. And when you made that joke, something inside me, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance." Jake was stunned. He had never imagined that Layla, quiet and kind as she had always seemed, could feel this way about him. His mind raced as he tried to process her words. He remembered the baskets of vegetables, the bread, the notes, the lingering glances. Everything she had done in the past week suddenly made sense. He had been blind to the signs, assuming she was simply being friendly. Now he understood that her gestures had been meaningful, carefully chosen, and filled with affection. I had no idea," Jake said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know you felt this way. I thought you were just being kind." Leela shook her head gently, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "Kindness can mean many things," she said. "And sometimes people wait a long time to show what they really feel. I didn't want to push you or make things uncomfortable. I just needed you to know." Jake felt a rush of emotions: surprise, guilt for not noticing sooner, and a deep warmth in his chest. He realized that her words were not just a confession, but also an expression of patience, courage, and trust. "Leela, I'm sorry if I made you wait or gave the wrong impression," he said softly. "I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't realize." She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You didn't hurt me," she said. "I understand why you didn't see it. I just wanted to be honest, finally." They stood there for a moment in silence, the cool night air around them, the distant sounds of the gathering, a soft hum behind them. Jake felt a strange mixture of relief and excitement. Relief because he now understood her feelings, excitement because he realized that he felt something too, something he hadn't acknowledged until now. I feel the same," Jake admitted slowly, the words feeling both strange and natural as they left his lips. "I've been thinking about you a lot, more than I expected, and I realize that I like you, Leela, more than just a friend." Her eyes widened slightly, and a soft smile spread across her face. "Really?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes," he said, taking a careful step closer. "I guess I just didn't know until now, but hearing you say what you did, it makes everything clearer." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the tension and uncertainty of the past weeks melting away. Then Leela laughed softly, a sound that carried a mix of joy and relief. "I've waited so long to hear you say that," she whispered. Jake smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "And I've waited to hear you tell me," he replied. They talked for a long while that night, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, and their hopes for the future. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and gentle teasing, but also with a sense of seriousness and depth that Jake hadn't experienced before. He realized that Leela was not only someone he cared for, but also someone he could truly understand, someone whose presence brought comfort, happiness, and a sense of completeness. As the night grew darker, Jake walked Leela back to her house. They paused at her gate, the quiet of the fields surrounding them. "Thank you for being honest with me," Jake said softly. "It means more than I can say." Leela smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And thank you for listening," she replied, "for understanding. I know it wasn't easy to hear all of this, but I'm glad we can be honest now." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of certainty that had been missing for so long. "I'm glad too," he said. I think this is the beginning of something good." She reached out and took his hand, a simple gesture, yet one that spoke volumes. Jake felt a warmth and connection he had never known, a sense that their friendship had transformed into something deeper, something meaningful and lasting. As he walked back to his own house that night, Jake couldn't stop thinking about Leela, her words, and the way she had changed the way he saw her and himself. He realized that sometimes life took unexpected turns, that a simple joke could lead to something extraordinary, and that courage and honesty could open doors to happiness that had seemed impossible before. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt truly excited about the future. He knew that he and Leela had a long journey ahead, full of challenges and discoveries, but he also knew that they would face it together, with honesty, respect, and growing affection. That night as he lay in bed, he smiled to himself, thinking about the day's events. The quiet ranch, the distant stars, and the gentle night air all seemed to whisper the same thing. Life could surprise you in the most wonderful ways, and sometimes, the people you least expect could become the ones who matter most. Jake drifted off to sleep with a sense of peace and anticipation, knowing that his friendship with Leela had taken a new turn, a turn filled with hope, love, and the promise of a shared future. And deep down, he knew that whatever happened next, their bond would grow stronger, built on trust, understanding, and the courage to follow their hearts. After that night at the town gathering, life between Jake and Leela began to shift in quiet, meaningful ways. Their friendship had always been strong, but now it carried a new layer, a tender, unspoken understanding that both of them were discovering together. Each day, their connection seemed to grow stronger, built not on words alone, but on shared moments, small gestures, and the simple comfort of knowing someone truly cared. Jake found himself noticing little things about Leela that he had never paid attention to before. The way she carefully tended her garden, making sure each plant had enough water and sunlight. The way she could recall details about every animal on the ranch, their habits and their needs. The way she listened, really listened, when someone spoke, giving her full attention without distraction. All of these things made him admire her even more, and he began to realize that his feelings were deeper than mere friendship. They were rooted in respect, affection, and a genuine desire to be near her. Leela, too, seemed to flourish in this new phase of their relationship. She was still kind and helpful, but there was a warmth in her interactions that went beyond simple neighborly kindness. She laughed more freely around Jake, teasing him in ways that made his chest feel light, and she offered support when he least expected it. One morning, as Jake struggled to repair a broken fence, Leela appeared with 2 cold glasses of lemonade. "Here," she said, handing him one. "You've been at it for hours. You need a break." Jake smiled, taking the glass. "Thanks. I guess I got a little carried away," he admitted. "You work too hard," Leela said, her eyes twinkling. "Maybe I'll have to start keeping an eye on you, make sure you don't overdo it." Her teasing made him laugh, a sound that echoed across the fields. "I might need you to do that," he said, realizing how much he enjoyed her presence. These small, ordinary moments became the fabric of their days, each one strengthening their bond in ways neither of them had anticipated. As the weeks passed, they found themselves spending more time together intentionally. They worked side by side on ranch chores, sharing stories and ideas, and learning more about each other's routines and dreams. Jake discovered that Leela had always been curious about life beyond their small town, fascinated by stories of other places, other people, and different ways of living. She spoke of these dreams with excitement and a quiet longing, and Jake realized how much he wanted to support her ambitions, to encourage her while also sharing his own hopes for the ranch and the life they were building together. One evening, they were walking along a dirt path near the edge of Jake's property, the sun setting behind the hills and painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. They carried baskets of fresh vegetables from Leela's garden, discussing what they would prepare for dinner that night. "I've been thinking," Jake said slowly, "about how much things have changed between us." Leela looked at him, curious. "How do you mean?" "I mean, I never realized before how important you are to me," he said, his voice soft. I always saw you as my neighbor, someone I could rely on, but now I see you differently. You're part of my life in a way that matters more than I can explain." Leela smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "I feel the same," she said. "I've always cared about you, Jake. Maybe I just didn't know how to show it until now." Their words hung in the air, filled with honesty and a shared understanding that made their hearts beat faster. For the first time, they were not only acknowledging their feelings but embracing them, letting their bond grow naturally and without fear. As they continued to spend time together, Jake began to see the depth of Leela's character even more clearly. She was thoughtful, brave, and fiercely loyal, not only to her family and traditions, but also to the people she cared about. He admired how she balanced her independence with her willingness to support those around her, and he realized that this strength was part of what had drawn him to her in the first place. Leela, on the other hand, saw qualities in Jake that she had always respected but now appreciated on a deeper level. She admired his dedication to the ranch, his care for the animals, and the quiet patience with which he approached life. She noticed the little things he did for others, often without expecting anything in return, and she found herself inspired by his integrity and kindness. Together, they complemented each other, each one bringing out the best in the other. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence together, a sudden summer rain began to fall. They laughed as the drops splashed around them, their clothes soaked but their spirits high. Jake pulled a tarp from the side of the barn and they quickly covered the tools, but neither of them rushed inside. Instead, they stood together in the rain for a few moments, enjoying the freshness, the smell of wet earth, and the unexpected adventure of the moment. "You know," Leela said, her voice soft over the sound of the rain, "I never thought a simple day of work could feel like this." Jake smiled, reaching for her hand. "I feel the same way," he admitted. "Being with you, it makes everything better." It was moments like these that solidified their connection, moments that required no words beyond simple gestures and shared experiences. They began to plan small adventures together, picnics by the river, walks through the fields, and quiet evenings under the stars, talking about dreams, fears, and the future. Each shared experience brought them closer, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Jake also began to learn more about Leela's Apache heritage. She shared stories from her family, traditions that had been passed down through generations, and values that shaped her outlook on life. Jake listened with fascination, asking questions and showing genuine interest in understanding her world. In turn, Leela took an interest in the ranching work that had been Jake's life for so long, learning about the animals, the crops, and the rhythm of farm life. Together, they bridged their worlds, finding common ground in their shared respect for hard work, honesty, and care for the land. Their relationship was not without challenges. There were moments of misunderstanding, small disagreements about work or daily routines, and the occasional awkwardness as they navigated their new feelings. But each time, they faced these moments with patience, communication, and a willingness to understand each other. They discovered that true partnership required effort, compromise, and the courage to be open and vulnerable with one another. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day of work, Jake turned to Leela. "I've been thinking about what comes next," he said. Leela looked at him, curious. "What do you mean?" "I mean us," he replied. "I want to make sure we're building something strong, something real. I don't want this to just be a fleeting moment. I want us to grow together, to support each other, and to face whatever comes our way." Leela smiled, squeezing his hand. "I feel the same way, Jake. I want that too. We've already come so far, and I know there's so much more ahead of us." As they watched the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows over the fields, they felt a quiet certainty in their hearts. They had grown together, learning from each other, supporting each other, and discovering the depth of their feelings. Their relationship was no longer just a friendship or a budding romance. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. In the weeks that followed, Jake and Leela continued to grow closer, exploring new aspects of their lives together while strengthening the bond they had always shared. They celebrated small victories, helped each other through challenges, and took joy in the simple pleasures of life: the taste of fresh bread, the laughter of children, the beauty of a sunset, and the comfort of being with someone who truly understood them. Through it all, they learned that love was not just about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about patience, kindness, understanding, and the willingness to see the best in each other. They discovered that the strongest relationships were built on shared values, mutual respect, and a deep sense of care for one another's well-being. By the end of this season, Jake and Leela had become inseparable, their lives intertwined in ways that felt natural and inevitable. They had grown individually and together, learning the importance of communication, empathy, and trust. And as they looked toward the future, they felt a quiet confidence that whatever challenges or opportunities awaited them, they would face them side by side, with love, respect, and unwavering support. Spring had returned to the town, bringing with it a sense of renewal and new beginnings. The fields were green and alive, flowers blossomed along the fence lines, and the air carried the sweet scent of fresh grass and earth. For Jake and Leela, this season felt especially meaningful. They had grown closer than ever over the past months, their bond strengthened by shared experiences, laughter, and understanding. Every day spent together felt like a gift, a reminder of how far they had come and how much they valued one another. Jake woke early one morning, as he often did, to tend to the ranch. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm golden glow across the fields. As he worked, his thoughts wandered to Leela. He remembered the first time he had joked about marrying her, the way she had looked at him, and the confession she had shared at the town gathering. That moment had changed everything, opening the door to a relationship neither of them had anticipated but both had embraced wholeheartedly. As he repaired a section of fence near the barn, he heard the familiar sound of Leela's voice calling out to him. She was carrying a basket filled with fresh herbs and flowers, her face lit with a bright smile that made his heart skip a beat. "Good morning, Jake," she called cheerfully. "I thought you might like some fresh herbs for your breakfast." Jake looked up and grinned. "You always know how to make mornings better, Leela. Thank you." They worked together in easy companionship, the rhythm of their tasks punctuated by laughter, light teasing, and quiet conversation. It was in these simple moments, the ordinary yet meaningful tasks of daily life, that Jake realized how deeply intertwined their lives had become. He had come to see Leela not just as a friend or a neighbor, but as a true partner, someone whose presence enriched every part of his life. Over the following days, Jake found himself thinking more seriously about their future. He wanted to make a commitment to show Leela that his feelings were not fleeting or superficial. He wanted to take the next step, not as a joke, but as a sincere promise of love, trust, and partnership. The thought both excited and terrified him. He wanted the moment to be perfect, meaningful, and unforgettable. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, Jake decided it was time. He prepared a small picnic near the edge of the field, under the shade of a large oak tree. He laid out a blanket, arranged some of Leela's favorite treats, and placed a small bouquet of wildflowers at the center. Everything was simple, yet carefully chosen to reflect his feelings, thoughtful, sincere, and full of heart. When Leela arrived, carrying a basket of freshly picked vegetables, she looked at the setup with surprise and delight. "Jake, this is beautiful," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with admiration. "I wanted to do something special," Jake said softly, a nervous smile on his face. "Something that shows how much you mean to me." They sat together on the blanket, sharing food, stories, and laughter as the sky changed colors above them. The moment felt magical, quiet, and intimate, far removed from the noise and busyness of the world. Jake could feel his heart pounding, knowing that soon he would express what he had been feeling for so long. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple ring. He took a deep breath, looking into Leela's eyes. "Leela," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves he felt, "from the moment we became friends, I've admired and respected you. Over time, I've come to realize that I love you, truly and deeply. You've changed my life in ways I never imagined, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Leela was silent, her eyes glistening with emotion. Then, a radiant smile spread across her face, and she took his hand in hers. "Jake, I've been waiting for this day for a long time," she said softly. "Yes, I will marry you." The relief, joy, and love that washed over Jake were overwhelming. He slipped the ring onto her finger and they embraced, the world around them fading into the background. For that moment, there was only the two of them, connected in a bond of trust, affection, and shared dreams. In the weeks that followed, Jake and Leela began to plan their wedding, keeping it small and meaningful. They wanted it to reflect their values, family, community, and love. Neighbors helped with preparations, offering flowers, food, and decorations. The town buzzed with excitement, eager to celebrate the union of two people who had quietly, yet profoundly, touched each other's lives. Their wedding day arrived on a bright, clear morning. The ceremony was held outdoors, in a meadow surrounded by the rolling hills of the countryside. Friends and family gathered, filling the space with warmth, laughter, and heartfelt congratulations. Leela wore a simple, elegant dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers, and Jake looked handsome in his well-worn ranch attire, a testament to the life they shared. As they exchanged vows, promising love, respect, and support, there was a sense of completeness in the air. Every smile, every tear, every word spoken reflected the journey they had taken together, from neighbors to friends, to partners who understood and cherished each other deeply. After the ceremony, the celebration continued with food, music, and dancing. Children ran across the meadow, couples laughed and shared stories, and Jake and Leela moved among their guests with joy and gratitude. It was a day of unity, a day of love, and a day that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. In the quiet moments after the celebration, Jake and Leela stood together, looking out over the fields that had been the backdrop of their story. "I can't believe how far we've come," Jake said softly. Leela leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "It feels like a dream," she replied, "but it's real and it's ours." Jake smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I'm grateful for every moment, every laugh, every challenge we faced. It led us here. And I'm grateful for you," Leela said. "For your kindness, your patience, and your love. You've made me feel seen, valued, and cherished." As they held each other, the sun setting behind the hills, they knew that life would continue to bring challenges and surprises. But they also knew that they would face everything together, with honesty, respect, and unwavering support. Their love was no longer a quiet possibility or a gentle hope. It was real, strong, and enduring. In the months and years that followed, Jake and Leela built a life together filled with shared work, laughter, and dreams. They continued to tend the ranch, care for the animals, and nurture their land. They celebrated traditions from both of their families, blending cultures and values in a way that honored their heritage and strengthened their bond. Every day, they discovered new reasons to appreciate one another, from small gestures of kindness to moments of quiet understanding. They learned that love was not just about grand declarations, but about patience, trust, and the simple joys of sharing life together. Their bond grew stronger with each passing season, rooted in the experiences, challenges, and victories they shared. And through it all, they remembered that moment, the first joke, the confession, the evening under the stars, when their lives had changed forever. It reminded them that love could appear in unexpected ways, that courage and honesty could open doors to happiness, and that sometimes the people you least expect could become the ones who mattered most. Jake and Leela faced the future together, hand in hand, hearts intertwined and spirits full of hope. They had found in each other a partner, a friend, and a love that would carry them through life's seasons. And as they looked out over their fields, the sun rising on another day, they knew that their story, one of patience, growth, and heartfelt connection, was only just beginning.